has to be real, you know. And occasionally journalists would, in these times, have said to me, well, these songs are very personal, you know, and somebody might even say too personal, but they misunderstand the magic of music when they say that.
For decades, Mick Hucknall was known for the voice behind some of Simply Red's biggest hits, with the band selling more than 50 million albums worldwide. But away from the stage, Mick was dealing with problems most fans knew nothing about. From addiction to a painful family feud. These are the parts of his story he kept out of the spotlight. The admission that shocked the industry in 2010. The lead singer of Simply Red made a confession that left the entire music industry stunned. Mick Hucknall stepped forward and issued an explicit public apology to almost 1,000 women for his behavior during the height of his fame in the 1980s. At the time, Hucknall was living the kind of wild, chaotic lifestyle that came with being one of pop music's biggest stars. He later admitted that, in 3 years, he slept with more than 3,000 women. From the outside, it looked like he was living the life of a successful pop star, but behind the scenes, things were spinning out of control. Celebrity magazines couldn't get enough of his love life. Photographers and reporters followed him everywhere, and his relationships quickly became regular news in the papers. Hucknall was frequently spotted alongside some of the biggest names in the entertainment industry, including Catherine Zeta-Jones and supermodel Helena Christensen. To the public, he had it all. He had gone from a working-class upbringing in England to becoming a world-famous singer, with money, fame, and plenty of attention from famous women. That lifestyle eventually started to get to him. He spent months traveling from one city to another on tour, going from packed arenas and screaming crowds to quiet hotel rooms at the end of the night. He became used to filling that silence with a constant stream of short-lived relationships. Most of these relationships lasted only a few hours before he was on to the next city. After a while, keeping up that lifestyle started to take a toll, and Hucknall found himself completely worn out. Looking back decades later, the singer expressed genuine long-term regret for how he treated people. He admitted that his selfish habits ended up hurting good, genuine women who actually cared about him along the way. Over time, he also realized that his constant need for attention wasn't really about being famous or enjoying the perks that came with being a rock star. They were tied to something much deeper, a need for validation that had been with him since childhood. But to understand why Mick spent years looking for attention from so many women, we need to go back to his childhood in Manchester, where his mother's sudden absence left a lasting mark on him. His mother's sudden disappearance in 1963, 3-year-old Mick Hucknall woke up only to find out his mother, Maureen, had packed her bags and walked out, leaving her family behind without warning. Suddenly, his father, Reg Hucknall, a barber in working-class Manchester, was left to raise a young boy completely on his own. Reg did everything he could to keep the family going, often working long hours to make ends meet. Raising a child on his own was unusual for a working father in Britain at the time, so he threw himself into work and kept his feelings to himself. Growing up without his mother, Mick had to deal with a lot of loneliness at a young age. His father wasn't there emotionally, and he had no mother figure around to comfort him when he was upset or reassure him when he felt lost. He rarely talked about what he was going through, and those feelings stayed with him long after childhood. His home was often silent, and Mick grew up spending a lot of time on his own. He later said that being raised this way made it difficult for him to connect with other children and left him feeling like he didn't quite fit in. Without a proper family setup, he began searching for a way to process the silence around him. He found an outlet in writing and started putting his thoughts down on paper. Those early scribblings would eventually become the starting point for his songwriting. Yet writing alone could not fix the emotional damage. The loss of maternal affection left an enormous void in his life, which gradually turned into an uncontrollable craving for female attention. As Mick got older, that need for attention started to shape the way he lived. He came to believe that winning women over would somehow make up for what he had missed as a child. Over time, that need became so strong that he famously said he wanted to be loved by every woman in the world. Some critics saw the comment as nothing more than a rock star enjoying his fame. But for Mick, it seemed to go deeper than that. His constant need for attention may have been tied to the feelings of rejection he had carried since he was a little boy. Eventually, as a young punk singer struggling to make a name for himself, He found a way to turn all of that frustration into music. The Frantic Elevators. By the late 1970s, Manchester had become an important part of Britain's growing punk scene. Mick Hucknall was drawn to the energy of it all and wanted to make a name for himself as a performer. In 1977, he formed his first band, the Frantic Elevators. The band played loud, rough punk music in small, packed clubs around northern England. Among those early songs was something quite different, Holding Back the Years, a song Mick had written in his bedroom. It was slower and more personal than the rest of their material, with a moody sound that barely caught the attention of anyone outside their local scene. For 4 long years, the band pushed through a brutal underground grind. They loaded heavy gear into broken-down vans, played small gigs for little money, and released independent singles that failed to break onto the official charts. Mainstream radio ignored them, and financial success remained completely out of reach. Around the same time, the music scene was starting to change. Punk was losing some of its edge as post-punk and electronic sounds became more popular. Mick could see where things were heading, and he realized that staying with the same loud punk sound wasn't going to get him very far. During those years on the road, Mick started to realize that punk wasn't really where his strengths lay. He spent hours listening to American soul, blues, and R&B, paying close attention to singers who could make a song feel powerful without having to shout. Slowly, he began to understand that his own voice was better suited to something much more soulful. His voice was very different and unlike any other singer in the northern indie scene. By 1982, the Frantic Elevators had run their course. After 4 years of trying to break through, the band split up without ever having a hit. At 22, Mick was back in Manchester with no clear idea of what he would do next. He had no money, no record deal, and no band left. Still, he wasn't ready to give up on music. If anything, the experience made him realize what he wanted to do next. He wanted to start over with a new band that would give him the freedom to showcase his voice. Mick wanted to leave the rough punk sound behind and try something that felt more polished and accessible. He started writing new songs while revisiting some of the ideas he'd had years earlier, including the song he'd written in his bedroom. Now he needed the right musicians to help him build the soulful sound he had in mind. Left with nothing but a failed band and a handful of songs, Mick did the unthinkable. He rebranded himself, stepped into the soul genre, and accidentally created a global phenomenon. The birth of an iconic sound in 1984, Mick began putting together a fresh group of talented musicians from the local Manchester music scene. Rather than making the mistake he did with his previous band, he put together a group of musicians who could work around his voice and the sound he was trying to create. It was there, and then the project Simply Red was born. Mick's look also helped him stand out, especially as music videos were becoming a huge part of pop culture. His long, curly red hair, oversized coats, and unusual hats made him easy to recognize on MTV. But it wasn't just that. His deep, soulful voice caught people off guard. Critics described his style as blue-eyed soul, a term used for white artists performing classic R&B and soul music. His incredible vocal range allowed him to slide between smooth melodies and complex notes, giving the music a genuine emotional weight that stood out on mainstream radio. It did not take long for major music executives to notice the band's growing popularity. After witnessing their energetic live performances, Elektra Records signed Simply Red to a major record contract. In 1985, they entered the studio with producer Stuart Levine to record their debut album, Picture Book. In no time, the band scored an immediate breakthrough with their debut single, a cover of the 1982 song Money's Too Tight to Mention. Driven by a fast-paced groove and mixed soulful vocals, the track climbed into the UK top 10 and quickly gained massive traction across global music charts. That rapid success completely flipped Mick's life upside down. Within a matter of months, a working-class youth who had been struggling to pay rent in northern England was receiving massive royalty checks and international recognition. He was suddenly traveling overseas, dining in expensive restaurants, and rubbing shoulders with music industry elites. After years of struggling financially, the change was hard to take in, but he quickly got used to the life that came with being a successful musician. Simply Red was already finding its way up the charts, but an older song from Mick's punk days was about to change everything. The personal track would take the band all the way to #1 in America and give millions of listeners a glimpse into the man behind the music. Mick started writing Holding Back the Years when he was just 17, sitting alone in his bedroom in Manchester. Years later, while he was with the Frantic Elevators, the band recorded a rough, slow version of the song with a punk edge. At the time, hardly anyone paid attention to it. When Simply Red recorded the song again, producer Stuart Levine heard something special in it. He decided to take out the heavy guitars and give the melody more room to stand on its own. The new version was much simpler, built around a soft drum beat, understated bass, and Mick's soulful voice. The song was deeply personal for Mick. Some of the lyrics reflected his father's struggle to raise him alone, while others dealt with the pain of losing his mother. This wasn't simply another pop song for him. He was drawing from his own childhood and turning those family experiences into something people could hear in his music. To match the record, the band released a music video that visually portrayed Mick's childhood memories. It was filmed in the English countryside with shots of train tracks, old brick houses, and a young boy walking through the fields. MTV put the video into heavy rotation, and before long, millions of viewers were familiar with Mick's face and distinctive style. By July 1986, Holding Back the Years had reached the #1 spot on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. For Mick, it was an incredible moment. A 25-year-old singer from Northern England had taken a deeply personal song and turned it into a soul hit that connected with millions of people. Achieving that milestone proved to be a double-edged sword for the young frontman. Millions of people connected with Mick's story and found something of their own in the lyrics. Yet every night on tour, he had to stand in front of thousands of people and sing about some of the most painful parts of his childhood. Even though it brought him wealth, respect, and worldwide fame, it also peeled the old wounds wide open. With America at his feet and the world singing his life's tragedy, Mick gave in to the absolute excesses of 1980s stardom, kicking off a dark spiral of lifestyle indulgence. Life at the top, it wasn't long before the fame started to change his life. He now took trips on private jets, moved from one five-star hotel suite to another, and spent his nights at exclusive late-night clubs alongside some of the biggest names in music. Simply Red's world tours soon became huge, non-stop events, and Mick was right in the middle of it all. The backstage was always busy, with fans, partygoers, and local guests all coming and going. After growing up with very little money in Manchester, Mick was suddenly surrounded by a life where everything seemed available to him. His relationships became short-lived, with one encounter often leading straight into the next. Behind all the partying, there was something deeper going on. Mick seemed to use his fame and reputation with women to distract himself from the insecurities he had carried since childhood. The constant attention gave him a sense of validation, even if it never really filled the gap he was trying to hide. By keeping himself surrounded by people who wanted to be around him, Mick could avoid feeling unwanted or alone. The British tabloids quickly picked up on his wild lifestyle, putting him on their front pages and portraying him as a wealthy, arrogant pop star. That same attitude showed up behind the scenes. Mick was known for having little patience with record executives or critics who questioned his music or tried to tell him how to run his career. He often clashed with people in the industry and wasn't afraid to stand his ground when it came to his music. Those tensions eventually reached the band itself. As disagreements grew over the music and who had the final say, several of the original members left. Over time, Simply Red became less of a traditional band and more of Mick's project, with him taking control of most of the creative and business decisions. As the 1980s came to an end, Mick was already working on what would become the peak of his career. He spent long days in the studio writing and recording, determined to keep Simply Red at the top. Yet all the success and money still didn't solve the personal problems he was dealing with. He later admitted that all the money, expensive homes, and attention from famous women still left him feeling empty. Once the shows were over and the crowds were gone, he would return to his hotel room alone. All the success in the world couldn't take away the loneliness he still carried with him. For a while, it seemed like nothing could slow Mick down. Then in 1991, he released an album that would define the decade, but it pushed him further than he had ever gone, both physically and mentally. The album Stars blew past every sales expectation, becoming the single best-selling record in the United Kingdom for 2 consecutive years in 1991 and 1992. Supporting a diamond-certified album demanded a grueling, multi-year international tour schedule. Mick spent night after night performing in huge arenas, and it soon began to take a toll on him. By 1996, Mick was tired of the life he'd been living for years. The women, the parties, and the constant attention were no longer enough to keep him distracted. Instead of dealing with what was really bothering him, he started drinking and leaned heavily on substance use, sending his life in another dangerous direction. That choice marked the start of a 5-year battle with heavy drinking that lasted from 1996 through 2001. Throughout these difficult years, Mick operated as a high-functioning addict. He consumed massive amounts of alcohol on a daily basis, yet somehow managed to step onto arena stages, deliver strong live vocals, and complete studio recording sessions. To the fans watching him from the audience, he appeared to be the same successful rock star who had dominated pop music for a decade. Behind closed doors, his heavy drinking was taking over his personal life and isolating him from the people around him. By the late 1990s, Mick's drinking was starting to take a visible toll. Photos from that period showed him looking more tired and worn down than before. His health was suffering, and even keeping up with the long performances that had once come naturally to him was becoming harder. The drinking also started to affect Mick's work in the studio. Simply Red's late 1990s albums, including Blue in 1998 and Love and the Russian Winter in 1999, didn't get the same response as his earlier work. Critics felt the songs were missing some of the energy and emotion that had made the band's earlier music so popular. Mick was drinking heavily and sinking deeper into a difficult period in his life. Then, just when things seemed to be at their worst, news came from across the world that he never saw coming. His estranged mother had finally spoken out, and she had a lot to say. His mother's shocking retaliation. After decades of complete silence, Mick Hucknall stepped out of obscurity to give an explosive interview to the British press from her home in Dallas, Texas. She directly challenged the story Mick had shared with the public throughout his whole career. Maureen fiercely denied that she had simply abandoned her young son in 1963. Instead, she claimed she left the house to save herself from an unstable situation with his father, Reg. According to her, leaving was the only way out of a miserable marriage. She expressed intense anger over how her former family portrayed her in the media. Maureen was furious about being painted as a bad mother in massive global hit songs. In a shocking moment that made front-page news worldwide, she told reporters she would physically slap Mick if she ever saw him again for misrepresenting her character. Things took a turn as reporters started questioning Mick's credibility, wondering if the pop star had weaponized his childhood trauma to build a sympathetic image and sell millions of records. The public fallout hit Mick hard. Seeing his childhood and family problems spread across the media brought back painful memories he had spent years trying to escape through drinking. The press even tried to turn the situation into a dramatic reunion between Mick and his mother, but he refused to take part. He saw no reason to reconcile with a woman who felt like a total stranger, believing her sudden return was driven more by his fortune than any genuine maternal love. Mick stood by his music and the memories he had grown up with. He still continued to sing, holding back the years, putting the same emotion into it every time. Whatever his mother said years later, Mick believed that what he experienced as a young boy in Manchester was his truth. In the end, Mick had to accept that some family relationships can't be repaired. And sometimes, there is no happy ending or closure, especially when it is put in the public. His mother's lack of acceptance left Mick facing a choice he could no longer avoid. He could keep drinking and running from his problems, or finally confront the pain that had been following him since childhood. For the first time, he had to decide what kind of life he actually wanted. The person behind the mask for years, the British press painted Mick as arrogant and difficult. Critics took shots at everything from his red hair to his appearance and his very public love life. Mick wasn't afraid to hit back in interviews, and that often led to arguments with journalists who criticized his music. Years later, he explained what was really behind that tough demeanor. Acting tough was just a way of protecting himself. Beneath all the confidence, He was dealing with deep insecurity and a shyness he rarely showed in public. Acting confident gave him a way to hide how unsure of himself he really felt. His outspoken nature extended well beyond the music press and into national politics. In the late 1990s, he became a vocal supporter of Tony Blair and New Labour, even donating money and showing up at campaign events. He was genuinely excited about the changes they promised to make. Over time, that enthusiasm faded into deep disappointment. As political scandals mounted and policies became clearer, Mick felt let down by the leaders he had championed. He became increasingly disappointed with politics and eventually stepped away from speaking publicly about it. Away from the music and the headlines, Mick was also making smart moves with his money. He knew his success in music might not last forever, so he started putting his royalties into things that could give him some financial security later on. He built up a property portfolio across Europe and even invested in a successful construction company. One of Mick's biggest business ventures took him to the slopes of Mount Etna in Catania, Sicily. He started a winery called Il Cantante, which means the singer in Italian. Mick wasn't simply putting his name on the bottles either. He was involved in the winemaking process and helped produce wines that earned praise from critics around the world. He also purchased a massive property in Ireland, known as the Glenmore Estate, located along the quiet rivers of County Donegal. He turned the land into a world-class tourism and sport fishing estate, personally overseeing its operations. Managing real estate, producing wine, and running countryside properties provided a healthy distraction from the pressures of being a pop star. Working on projects outside the entertainment industry gave him a fresh purpose, helping him regain his mental grounding and stay sober after years of alcohol abuse. With his business doing well and his personal life finally settling down, Mick faced one of the biggest decisions of his career. He decided it was time to bring Simply Red to an end. The end of an era after 25 years of hit records and more than 50 million albums sold worldwide. Mick made a surprising decision to bring Simply Red to an end. He had grown tired of the pressure that came with keeping the band successful. He wanted the freedom to make music because he enjoyed it, without worrying about radio play, sales, or whether the next song would top the charts. The freedom gave Mick the chance to try something different, including a tribute album dedicated to American blues legend Bobby "Blue" Bland. Before closing the chapter permanently, Mick wanted to give his global fan base a proper farewell. In 2010, the band launched a massive farewell world tour that spanned several continents. For months, Simply Red traveled to major cities across Europe, South America, and Asia, playing emotional shows in front of packed arenas. The journey finally came to an end in December 2010 at London's O2 Arena. In front of thousands of fans, Mick performed a set filled with Simply Red's biggest songs, looking back on 25 years of music and memories. Stepping away from the music gave Mick a chance to slow down and take better care of himself. Ending the band also meant leaving behind the lifestyle that had come with years of touring. The late nights, constant parties, free drinks, and unhealthy surroundings were finally no longer part of his everyday life. Removing himself from all of it helped him permanently distance himself from the substance triggers that had fueled his past struggles with heavy drinking. After Simply Red came to an end, journalists and other musicians began looking back at what the band had achieved. They credited Mick with helping bring soul and R&B to a much wider audience. His voice and style had stayed relevant through changing music trends, and over the years he earned a lot of respect in the industry. Simply Red was over, and the crowds that had followed Mick for years were finally gone. In that quiet chapter of his life, Mick found something he had spent years searching for. The redemption arc. No one would have thought that Mick Hucknall would find stability in a relationship. After retiring from music, he went under the radar and soon found love. Gabriella Wesbury was the woman who fundamentally transformed the music industry's most infamous bachelor. In 2010, the couple married in a private, highly exclusive ceremony at the historic Fortair Castle in Scotland. Soon the couple had a child. Becoming a husband and a father to his daughter, Romy True completely changed his priorities. For the first time, Mick built a calm, stable home filled with love, providing his daughter with the security he had missed during his own unstable childhood. Raising Romy helped heal the inner child inside him, finally filling the emotional void left by his mother's sudden departure in 1963. Today, Mick splits time between family homes in England, his estate in Ireland, and his Sicilian vineyard. As Mick entered his 60s, he began looking back on his younger years differently. Instead of feeling ashamed of the things he did in his 20s, he came to understand where that behavior came from. He realized that much of it was a young man searching for love, attention, and a sense of connection. Away from the spotlight, Mick also gave back to his community. He supports music education programs and social welfare projects, often doing so without looking for publicity. Mick had conquered his demons and found peace at home, but the stage was calling once again, and the 40th anniversary would trigger an unbelievable comeback that no one saw coming. To celebrate 4 decades of music, Mick shocked the industry by reforming Simply Red for a massive 40th anniversary tour spanning 2025 and 2026 across the UK, Ireland, and continental Europe. Night after night, fans and music critics expressed genuine astonishment at his performance. Even in his mid-60s, his signature vocals remained remarkably smooth, immaculate, and untouched by time. The comeback was far more nostalgic. The band released fresh music, including the studio album Time and a special retrospective project titled Recollections, featuring re-recorded versions of their classic hits. His massive contribution to global music earned him the prestigious ASCAP Golden Note Award in London, cementing his status as a master songwriter. He even made surprise festival appearances alongside legends such as Rod Stewart, performing for massive crowds at major events, including Glastonbury. Returning to those huge stages felt like a full-circle moment for Mick. His voice and music had lasted through decades of criticism, headlines, and public scrutiny. After everything he had been through, he came to appreciate what mattered most to him: his voice, his family, and the quieter life he had built away from the